I am happy to introduce Kyle. And Kyle, I'm looking forward to having you answer some questions. We did this a couple years ago when the medal was new to you, but welcome today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Just to begin, I have a couple of personal messages that I want to make sure that I don't miss for you. One is from a friend of yours, Dave Barbaret, who says, hello and how are you? Okay. And then I think perhaps the most important one, and this is hello to Whitey from Jessica Langevin.
Oh, nice. Glad she's able to jump on.
Yeah, she said she's listening in, misses you dearly, and she's very proud of you. So it's always nice to know that we have friends in the audience. Okay, Medal of Honor. You are one of the youngest Medal of Honor recipients with us at the moment, and you've now had your medal for about 7 years, or is that right? 7 years you've been wearing that?
Yeah, this year will be 7. That's correct.
Coming up on 7. And you would, so it's a fairly new experience for you, but let's talk about how you got here. You were very young when you went into the service. Would you tell us a little bit about your background and growing up and what kinds of things you like to do? What took you to the service?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Seattle, Washington, had a pretty regular childhood. I'd say, it's a little different than some of the other, people in my school and just my neighborhood in general. Didn't really do any organized sports, kind of always, like anything that gave you adrenaline rush. So mountain biking, riding dirt bikes, skiing, snowboarding, things of that nature. It's interesting. It was when I was in high school and, you start that conversation about what are you going to do when you graduate, if you're going to go to college or, what your career path looks like. And, looking back, I can't really remember the specific point in time where I just knew I was going to go into the military. But, as the years went on and that date got closer to graduation, I just knew that's what I wanted to do. Graduated in 2005 and then, it wasn't shortly after that I enlisted in the Army. It was interesting. So my father had served, he was Special Forces near the tail end of Vietnam. And then my grandfather as well, but he died before I could really talk much about his service, but he was a pilot during World War II. And so, we come from a history of service, and I just knew that's what I wanted to do. And I'd originally went into the Marine Corps recruitment office, and whether you're familiar with it or not, they're all kind of in the same area or same building, if you will. I think they call it Armed Forces, career centers. And
right.
I was pretty convinced I was going to go in the Marine Corps, and then I told my father about it, and he had some pretty colorful language on the reasons why I would be not joining the Marines and instead going to the Army. And so, I had a pretty short list of requirements. I wanted to carry a rifle and be on the front line, and went into the recruiter's office for the Army, and he's like, hey, you got just the thing, infantry, and I'll even throw in an airborne contract and you can jump out of planes. And I was like, yeah, sounds good. And off I went.
Okay, good. That's great. So that question actually came from Highland Middle School in Texas, and they're watching with us today. And I think that probably what they were really looking for was that connection between your interest in exciting things like dirt bikes and getting into jumping out of airplanes. Had you ever thought about airborne before you got into the recruiter's office?
No, actually I hadn't. And so it's kind of funny. I use this terminology or this little story when I speak about, transitioning into a career after the military. But looking into the Army, it's like looking through, a tinted window in a car before you join. I mean, you roughly understand what happens, but, there's so many different jobs and so many different career paths that you can choose. You don't really know until you get in really what your career can turn into. And so I went home and looked up airborne school and saw what it was about. And that looked exactly like something I would like to do. And then, when you actually go through airborne school, you realize it's not as much fun as you thought it was going to be. Sometimes you hit the ground pretty hard, but overall, it aligned with just how I was raised, always kind of exploring, seeing what I can push myself to, what my personal limits are. And it was a great experience.
So once you got into the service, did you go to Fort Bragg where'd you go for basic training?
So it's interesting. When you go infantry in the Army, your basic training and your advanced individual training, I forget what the terminology for it is today, but back then it was all combined. So, when you go through basic, you go through your infantry training, then you become, an infantry soldier. And then also at Fort Benning is airborne school. So you pretty much can get all your training done there before you report to your first duty station.
Okay, so you left Washington then right away as soon as you got into the service, I presume, to head to across the country. That what's the Army recruiting slogan? Join the Army, see the world. Is that right?
Yeah, and then they send you to Fort Benning, Georgia, which
Well,
I was unfortunate. I was unfortunate enough to be at that duty station twice in my career, and neither one of those times I was a fan of. So but it was interesting because I'd never been anywhere in the South at that point, and so even although I was in basic training, in February of 2006, the humidity, the difference as the season's progressing, you get into summer. I remember a few times, when you're getting done with your physical training or, doing push-ups for talking back, or which I was particularly good at, a few times I regretted my decision. I was just like, what did I get myself into?
I have to say that almost everybody I've ever known who found themselves in basic training experienced a little bit of that, wondering what they got themselves into. I think that your point that there are a lot of careers in the Army, as many as there are, many of us don't think about the varied careers, but what they all have in common is that basic training, which I think we'll probably come back to again and again. One of the schools that's watching with us today, or that will be watching your recording, is the Air Force Junior ROTC at Federal Way High School in Washington State. So, it's probably good for them to hear that if they decide to, and we know that ROTC does not, Junior ROTC is not a guarantee that anybody's going to join the military. It's definitely a high school program. But some of those kids are obviously considering that, and they might think about the fact that they will very likely be leaving Washington to go to the Deep South and get a different kind of humidity. But they were asking, how did you develop moral fortitude to be brave in the face of physical and mental challenges? And I don't think that's just, related to the Army, but I imagine they're asking, both as a kid and through your Army experience, how did you develop the moral fortitude that you needed for the challenges you ended up facing?
Yeah, so that's a kind of a two-part question. I think, prior to joining the military, there's a certain level of, development and influence from our parents and our, figures that we look up to, that help shape us who we are today. Some of those lessons about, who you want to be, what you want to stand for, that's developed early on. But I'd say everything that related to, my time in the service. So thinking about, what I found important about my time in the Army, what pushed me to my limits physically and mentally, and what made me make the choice to do anything that I ever did while wearing the uniform, came from really the values that are instilled during what I say is basic training. I mean, I went into the military not understanding anything about the culture, anything about duty, loyalty, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage, all the things that really encompass the Army values. But you learn quickly that, the mission's bigger than yourself. Your role is much more important than just you, what you choose to do. And I think for me, those points and everything that they try to beat into your head, not actually beat, but everything that they tried to, get you to absorb and I guess, incorporate into who you are as a service member didn't really take hold until I was in Afghanistan. And so, you understand the importance of being a member of a team. You understand the collective mission. You understand, what you're supposed to do, your discipline, your training, what role you're specifically supposed to serve, especially on while you're in your unit and you're getting ready to deploy. But once you're there and you spend time, and it's not just time. It's not like, when you see your friends after school or hang out on the weekends, it's, you're spending 24/7 with the people that, you are serving with. And for me, it was that bond that was created. It's often talked about, it's well covered. There's articles written about it, books and movies, but you can't understand what that bond is like until you've experienced it. And it really is like these people become a part of your family. And, quickly you understand that, what you will or will not choose to do, when you're called upon to do so. So for me, it was, 9 November 2007. It's not about you as a person. It's what you have to do for the guy to your left and right. You rely on them to keep you safe, and they rely on you to keep them safe. And so, I'm going to jump ahead briefly into that date of action, but, everything that I did that day, it was because, I was trained to handle that situation. And then what made me make the difficult choices to, potentially get myself, killed or wounded or whatever it may be, it was because I know if those roles were reversed, that person would do the exact same thing for me. And so it really didn't even come down to a choice. And the training kicks in, and you just instinctively know, this is what I need to do in this situation. This is what my leadership told me was important for me to know. This is the skills that, we did through countless repetitions preparing for this exact moment. And so, when it comes down to it, it's about the people. It's not why you're there. It's not, whose orders it was to go to this location. All of that is out the window, and it's absolutely just about the guy and girl to your left and right. And it's still something I'm dealing with today. So here we are almost 14 years later. I look back on that, and there's still things I reflect on and learn more about and have new feelings on. But at the end of the day, when people ask, how or why did you choose to do that? It was literally just because, that was my job. That's what I was trained to do. And I knew that if it was me out there, any one of those people on the hillside would have done the exact same thing.
I keep hearing you come back to training and doing what you did for the team, for those who were there with you. And one of our students here wrote in a question about any particular skills from when you were a child or when you were growing up that you took with you into the service. And it sounds like mostly you picked this up in training, but given that it sounds like you were primarily involved in individual sports when you were in high school, motorbiking and mountain biking and that kind of thing. Do you think that the Army itself, you said it really came into play in Afghanistan, but did getting into the Army start to build that sense of teamwork and community with you?
Absolutely. So growing up, I think one of the things that helped me was, not necessarily being like everybody else around me. So I know it's a little weird, and I'll elaborate, but, I didn't buy into, the team sports. Like, I wasn't really social. I didn't have, a big group of friends. But what I spent my time doing is what I enjoy. So, like I worked in a bicycle shop for years, and just that sort of problem solving, like figuring out how to fix things, really doing whatever, I wanted outside of school. Just whatever piqued my interest, I would explore it and get good at it and move on to something else. And I think I had a unique experience in basic training because, we went in 2006, and whether people know on this call or not, the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq were very, very active during that time. I mean, the amount of firefights that were happening, just the sheer amount of troops in both areas were at some of their highest levels. And so, our drill instructors that we had assigned to our platoon had a very different approach to how we were going to be trained. They really wanted us to be kind of free thinking, question some of the whys of, how we approach these tactics, or why do we respond this way in this situation? Really, because that's kind of what you need to have. Like, you need to understand your role within the rank structure. So if I'm, a specialist, I'm in charge of X, Y, and Z weapon system, that's my job. But, being able to, have the ability to question, hey, I think there's a better way to do this, or, hey, maybe there's another way we can cross this area safer, or, solve this problem, with another direction. And I think that helped as well, because, that mentality was, something that was shared by people I served with as well. Everybody had their own unique set of experiences, and, what they chose to train us on was relevant not only 100% to that day, but just to our deployment in general, because, you don't have the same routine every day. You don't have the same problems you're trying to solve. You're not faced with the same challenges. And so I just think all those, little steps in my life, and how I was raised, and how my, very junior time in the Army was, all kind of led to us as a unit being successful. But then for me, being able to do what I did on 9 November 2007, which is no different than anybody else on the trail that was there that day. I mean, we're all one team, one fight.
Well, I think that's really important for our students who are listening today and who will be listening to a recording later, to hear that no matter what your personality or your skills, there is a place for you in the team, but also the importance of that training, because essentially, while your official job on the day of the ambush was radio operator, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
You ended up being pretty much the only still functioning soldier there, in terms of being able to call in rescue, call in defense, and actually even act as a medic for everyone else, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that falls back on the training and just that collective experience that was shared with us before we deployed. I see a couple questions about, pieces of advice and things you can, give to maybe future service members, or, some people in JROTC. I'd share this little bit that ties into that. I mentioned, I think, my previous answer, where, it was really our leaders that had a large influence in, our success as a unit during that deployment. And I say that because, I was a very junior enlisted service member. I got to the 173rd as a private. So I basically know nothing except, how to roughly shoot my weapon and do a really good push-up, because that's what you learn in basic training. And obviously it's more complicated than that, but I look back and I feel like those are the only things I learned how to do. But,
also that's very young.
Yeah, well, exactly. And so me arriving in that position is no different than a new lieutenant, reporting to the unit at the same time. He might have, conceptually a better understanding of, the battlefield landscape, how to, operate and command and lead and stuff like that. But, we're on the same playing field when it comes to actual experience. And so, going there were people in our unit that had jumped into Panama, decades before.
Wow.
And so you have, just within our company, chosen company, decades worth of combat experience. across all different units, Iraq, Afghanistan, Kosovo, anywhere in between. And so, it was up to them, to decide pretty much how we were going to be as a unit. And, they had, I always say the 173rd was a very special group of people, and especially at deployment. It's true, it's a different Army over there than it is, if you go to Fort Bragg or Fort Hood, Fort Jackson, whatever it may be. But the way they chose to, share their experiences, regardless of their rank, it was all to prepare us as best we could for what they knew was going to happen. So, whether it's a, 6-month deployment or a 15-month, something's going to go wrong. At some point in time, there's going to be a big ambush, there's going to be a big firefight, whatever it may be. And they choose and had, the foresight to be able to, train us as best as we could. And so you mentioned that I was an RTO that day, but I had to do multiple jobs. And that's exactly because that's how they trained us. They wanted us to know, the job of the guys to the left and right of us, but then also the people that were senior to us. They wanted us to know what, Captain Farrar was supposed to be doing, what the FTO, so our FO, our forward observer, how does he call for fire? How does he direct artillery and bombs and planes to do everything that they're supposed to do? And, it's that level of training that they made us do in our preparation for the deployment is the only reason why, again, I keep coming back to this, but why that day turned out how it was. Because I was tested multiple times on, jobs that I wasn't supposed to do as a medic. How do I address this? As a taking over a section of the patrol where I had no leadership experience, but I had to still be in that position and try to figure things out. It's all because of, not only the mentorship that our leaders and more experienced people provided, but just that commitment to ensure that we were the best trained we could be for that deployment.
So
sorry, my computer's going to sleep here.
Whoops.
Yeah, it's good.
That's something I have to keep reminding myself, is to keep my computer awake here. So on a kind of a larger scale, so that perhaps our very diverse audience can put themselves into it in the various aspects of their lives, given that we talk about the skills and the values that are embodied in the Medal of Honor being those that fortunately most of us never have to put to use on a battlefield, but that are still something that we can all learn from and embrace and put to use. Is there anything in particular that comes to mind in light of what you were just talking about that you feel like you and the other junior, in terms of age and experience, members of your platoon learned from those who perhaps had jumped into Panama, the older and more experienced officers? And then the flip side of that, what do you think that you guys brought to them in terms of perhaps keeping them fresh and on their toes and up to date? Could you maybe give us a sense of the importance of the scope of experience there?
Yeah, and so what I think, from their standpoint, and again, like I can only comment on what I believe at this time, and after having conversations over the years, they knew, or I guess the big thing that I learned from them is, for lack of a better term, complacency kills. So, when it's that, when it's that, 4 or 5 weeks, nothing's happened, or maybe it's a couple months where nothing's happened. The importance of staying sharp on, your readiness. And that's actually something, oddly enough, just that whole readiness mindset is something that has carried on with me to this day. I'm in a completely different line of work, have my own company and things like that, but, still trying to be positioned to where, whatever may come up, you've thought about it before, or you have a way to address that. And it's just kind of that, have a plan, have a backup plan, and then even have a backup plan for that. I know there's, special terms for that in the military, but, really prepping for that unknown and having a way to address it is something that I took away from, their mentorship and their leadership throughout that time. And I think, for us being, newly, basically just new arrivals within the unit, leaders understand quickly, that, they were in that position at one point in time, and, it keeps them fresh to know that they have a real responsibility. It's not only do our lives depend on, how they choose to prepare us, but theirs does as well, because, bullets don't care about your rank or how much experience you have, or if this is your 10th deployment. One of them can go down and need one of us to help them. And, it's just understanding that, the success or failure was heavily on their shoulders and what they chose to do. I think it's a tough thing. And I'll jump to this right now because I think it's fitting. When I was approaching my time for either reenlistment or separating from the military in 2011, I thought about that exact same scenario. For me, after 9 November 2007, something changed, mentally with how I viewed my time in service and just the military in general. Nothing negative, but I just felt like I was kind of done. And, I knew that if I was going into a leadership position, which I was quickly approaching, I was already a sergeant, about to have a squad as a staff sergeant, and I'd be going back to, company, probably deploying. And I just didn't feel like I was that person. I didn't have my mind 110% into what I wanted to do. And I thought about the leaders that I had back in the 173rd, that they were all 110%, just the absolute picture of what you would want to be when you're in their position. And when I had some time to self-reflect, I knew I couldn't wear that same uniform they did. And so for me, it was a good time to get out and find something else.
That, I think that in that regard, you've answered a couple of other questions that have already come in. That sense of self-reflection that you had is really important, something that all of us probably need to be aware of. And I think also you answered, we had a question from Ranchero Middle School students out here on what was your advice on dealing with change in uncertain times. And I think you also essentially answered that it's very easy for us right now when we feel like much of life is on hold because of a pandemic, where we're not supposed to go places and do things that ordinarily we would be doing, to become complacent, to sit and not do things. But it's very important for us to be ready, because it's not always going to be like this. And whatever your area of readiness is out there, whether it's to get back into the school thing, our poor juniors and seniors who are looking at going off to college or into a career and feel like they've been stalled. Wow.
Yeah. And actually, if possible, I'd like to expand on that a little bit.
Go ahead. Absolutely.
And share a more recent story if I could. And so, one of the big things that just the military in general taught me was just adaptability. So, understanding that, your duty location changes, your job changes, even situations from, minute to minute change. And it requires you to, think about the problem, gather possible solutions, implement a strategy, and make it happen. I'll flash forward to this last year. So I had started a business, and we're primarily in, IT and cyber services for the federal government. Things were going okay, and then COVID hit. And so your ability to go meet with potential customers or partners or whatever it may be, is taken away. And so, it was a few hard weeks for me to, figure out, how do I move this forward? But then it was kind of falling back on, well, A, I'm not getting shot at, and B, there's a way around this. Like, let me figure this out. And then so, using those same skills I learned in the military, identifying the problem and, seeing how I could possibly work around it, ended up turning it around to be, most successful year yet. But point being is that, take that lesson from the military away. I mean, we all have the ability to do that. It's just, choosing how you approach the problem or how you approach that change. And then also, being in the right mindset. I'm lucky enough to have, a far more intelligent wife than I am myself. And, it's so funny. I'll get in a rut, or I'll get, just down on business, or, being isolated or whatever it may be. And she'll just, talk about my mindset, why are you doing this? Why are you doing your business? And, why is that bothering you? And it's just amazing, like how much talking with each other and just, not about the problems, about the stress you're facing, whatever it may be, can, really change how you're looking at that challenge and ways around it. And it's funny. I'm trying to use appropriate language right here. We'll always have, maybe borderline argument, but it's mostly her telling me what I'm doing wrong. And then I'll have that aha moment where it's like, yeah, you're right. This is what I'm doing. It's this behavior. I need to correct it. And, then I'll turn around and move forward. But I think it's just how we choose to look at problems and the solution, and having the right mindset to address it and overcome it. I think it's something important.
Well, and two things I really pull out of what you just said: having somebody in your corner who has the guts and the courage, and the willingness to put themselves out there and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And you to know that that person has your best interest in mind. So whether it's a good friend, a spouse, a teacher, a mentor, having someone who's willing to be honest with you about that can really help you take a look at yourself. But also, I think that you pointed out, and I don't know if everybody caught it because you tossed it out so quickly, but I have heard this not just from many Medal of Honor recipients, but from a good many veterans, and that is that perspective that at least nobody is shooting at me. Just a real short personal story. My dad was a World War II vet, and a reporter took him to see the premiere of Saving Private Ryan. And the reporter wrote afterwards, 10 minutes into the movie, when you're in the midst of that truly intense, horrific battle scene on the beaches of Normandy, she thought to herself, oh my gosh, what have I done? Why isn't he running out of this theater? And so she asked him afterwards, and he said, well, it was pretty accurate, but you're pretty darn safe sitting in your seat. And I just kind of, you made me think of that when you said, at least nobody's shooting at you. And I think that maybe that's something that a lot of our students might take into consideration, is that if they're frustrated about being locked away, if they are healthy, at least they don't have the virus, and maybe they could, think about that and what they can do to be careful to make sure that they help others not get it. So thank you for the insight on the perspective. And with that, you answered a couple other questions, but I'll toss them back out here in case there's anything you want to add. Student at Steel Canyon High School, Salvador Ochoa, asked, what do you do now that you have left the Army, and why did you choose what you did? And an associated question, because you keep answering the questions before I have a chance to ask them, what was the most difficult part of transitioning from the military to the civilian world? I think those are all kind of tied up together.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I left the military, college, so I had already applied and been accepted to UNC Charlotte, near where I live, and I attended there until I got my degree in finance. From that point, I went to work at a Canadian bank for a few months until I was awarded the Medal of Honor in 2014, and I spent about 5.5 years at Bank of America, and so I was a fixed income trader. So, closest thing I can say to that is bonds. So if you understand what that is. I was on a trading desk, and I actually really enjoyed that job. But the problem with that was, very specific set of skills. And then there's not much, room for advancement. It was a small 4-person group, and nobody really leaves that job once you get it. And so I had the desire in 2017 to do something different. I wanted to run my own business, and I wanted to I wasn't actually sure what direction I was going to take it, but I started 1109 in 2017, and right at the end of 2019 decided to get into the federal contracting space. And so understanding that, I have a passion to help our nation's veterans, inside the VA and help them on the active duty side with the Department of Defense. I saw, kind of an opportunity and been shaping that ever since. It's a challenge breaking into an industry you have no experience in and trying to grow a business, but it's also one it's been an enjoyable journey so far, and starting to see some of the progress and business building from that effort. It's been pretty exciting, especially in this first few weeks of the new year. It was funny. I was saying in some of my emails to partners and clients after the beginning of the year, I was like, hope 2021's off to a good start. It can't be any worse than 2020. But then we saw everything that happened in Washington. I quit saying that. But to follow on with the second part of your question, Kathy, the hardest part for me in the whole transition process was understanding, I guess, my new role. When you're in the military, especially if you're junior enlisted like I was, it is very comfortable and very easy to succeed because you're given all the tools necessary to be successful. So, think about, every day you're told, what uniform you need to bring for the next day, what you need, to bring to work, and pretty much, every measurable point of, how to meet your leadership's expectations. So it's very easy. Just do what they tell you and you're going to be successful at your job, at least, from a career progression wise. When you get out of the military, that's taken away. And so you quickly realize that nobody's responsible for your success or failure but yourself. And so having that mentality, it's a mentality shift of, really being your own commander and having to figure out your own mission and having some purpose behind that. I think that took me a while to establish, but I kind of just looked at school as my next mission. And, to graduate, you have to pass your classes, you have to do the work and all that stuff. And so figuring that out was a challenge, as well as, just the overall change in culture leaving the military for the civilian world. So I always like it to, contrast ecosystems. I mean, especially the people that are on the call that are in school, what an ecosystem is. And really the military is like one big separate ecosystem from, the rest of American society. Life's centered on a base, where your doctors are, your schools, your grocery store, gas station, anything that you need to live is located on that base. And it's very comfortable kind of existence. Everybody's wearing the same uniform. You all technically have the same job serving America. You face similar challenges. You have, similar successes. You're united by a single mission. So there's a kind of a collective cause for your existence within that area. And then you go on a Friday, turn in your ID card, and on Monday, that's gone. And then you're in a world where you haven't thought about having to go find a doctor, and, you haven't thought about schools and where to live. That's, what's best for your family, how to find a job, all those challenges that you hadn't thought about during your time in the uniform. It's suddenly that's your life. And, it's a big shock. It's a big shock to lose that sense of community and just that purpose that you once had while you wore the uniform. And so, finding what motivated me, what I wanted to pursue that was going to give me that same, sense of purpose, that same, feeling of accomplishment and things of that nature. It's still something I look for at certain times. I mean, I found a sense of purpose with my business and the work I do as a recipient, but, sometimes you still miss it. You miss that camaraderie. you miss that extended family that you had. And so, everybody faces their own unique challenges when they leave active duty. But, it's still up to that individual service member what they choose to do. You can be somebody who's, starting a company, or you can go to medical school or whatever it may be. But, continuing that advancement of your life forward is something that everyone needs to do. But it's up to them. It's their own choice. That's a lengthy response, but that's something I think and talk about a lot. And it means a lot, especially when you look back on the years, and your perspective changes over time, but those things have always held true.
Well, and that's a great chunk of advice for our students, because to some extent they have in a high school setting the same thing that you were describing in the service, obviously without the consistent threat of danger, but that they are told what to do and when to do it and when it's due, and they know what they're supposed to do to succeed in that. And when they get out, then there's the question of taking responsibility for their own lives thereafter. And are they going to go into the military? They're going to go on to school, into a career. And so that role changing, that was great advice all the way through, and the focus on responsibility. Speaking of role changes, while you transitioned out of the military and into school and then into work, which you mentioned, and of course you have now built a lovely family as well, but you also took on a new role in 2014 when the medal was awarded to you. And I see in the chat box, and everybody, of course, wants to know about the medal, and how did that new role perhaps change your life and give you both new responsibilities that go with it and new opportunities? And how do you balance all that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, one that has had a shifting answer over the years. Originally, when I got it, I just hated being a recipient. Because, before that day, I was just regular, Kyle. I was a veteran. I had a normal job, and life was good. I had met my girlfriend, and, was now going to be my wife, and I really liked life. And then suddenly, it all changes when the president puts that award around your neck. And people had told me before that specific date, your life's going to change, And I think I just didn't understand how it could. I was like, yeah, I'll just go back home and life will be normal. But, it's not really it was not the case. And you didn't understand it until, for me, when the award was being put around my neck and I'm looking directly at, Gold Star family members, you understand the weight of, what that award means, and also the responsibility that comes with it. Everybody, including myself, says that the award wears heavy, and it's true, because you understand that it's not, your award for your specific action that day, but it represents everybody who's killed in action, everybody you've ever served with, and really everybody who's ever worn the uniform in the defense of our country. I mean, it's a symbol of collective knowledge, training, dedication, commitment, everything that has, led up to the point for me being in that specific spot. And so, for me, it took a couple years to understand what I wanted to do as a recipient. It's considered like a certain platform. When you speak, people listen. And so choosing to leverage that in a responsible way for the right reasons is something that, every recipient needs to figure out for themselves. For me, I thought about the challenges I faced when I left the military, and they all kind of centered around topics I've already covered. But, finding a job, going to school, and then dealing with post-traumatic stress and just mental health care in general. So I made the decision very early on after 9 November 2007 to go get help, because I had, PTSD, all these things that were affecting my quality of life. Had I not gotten that help when I did, while I was still on active duty, I do not think I would have made it through school. I don't think I would have got the job I did, because I was directly related in how well I did in school. and I wouldn't have the life I do today. And so all those things that contributed to me being, where I am in my life, I wanted to help other transitioning service members not only have access to the same resources I did, the ones we all earned through the VA and through our time in service, but then also, share lessons from the collective community on, how to be more successful in those transitions. So if it's, getting a job, this is how you do it. Here, let me share these resources with you. And then if it's on the mental health side, it's helping, share my story for reaching out and getting help and how it's no different than anybody else. And I think what we've seen over the past year with COVID is that, mental health, post-traumatic stress, anything related to just the story of mental health in general is not like a veteran's issue. Like post-traumatic stress is not because you went to war. Like it can affect anybody in all walks of life. Like it doesn't care what your religion is or what political party you're assigned to or, what your income level is. Like it can literally strike anybody for whatever reason. Like our brains are incredibly complex and we're learning new stuff about them all the time. And, I can look at the same incident that somebody to my left or right looked at, and we can all process it different and it affects us different. And so I just try to spread as much awareness as I can about that because, as we've seen with COVID, this isolation, financial stress, job security, the challenges of, families having kids at home all the time while they're trying to work in a new remote environment, like all these stressors can lead to, people needing help. And we've somehow gotten to the point as a society where it's, perfectly acceptable to go to the doctor for a broken bone. But, if you have, trouble sleeping at night or, some other symptom of trauma or, stress, whatever it may be, that somehow that's not as important as, an injury you can physically see. And it's just time we change that perception, not only as a country, but especially when we're thinking about, our nation's veterans and active duty service members. And so I get a little winded on that one because I'm really passionate and I get a little irritated when I see people suggest otherwise. But it's just those three areas are what I like to focus on as a recipient just because they're personal to me and I know they're not unique to me either.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's really important because you've been wonderfully involved with the limited amount of time that you have with the Medal of Honor Society's Character Development Program, which is available for all students, K through 12, all educators to use. It's at no charge. But the values that it emphasizes are courage, sacrifice, integrity, commitment, citizenship, and patriotism. But specifically in this case, what you're talking about, and it's almost a situation of contraries, that it takes courage to ask for that kind of help. And here we are asking people to be brave in the face of something that they're afraid to do. But getting the help makes all the difference. So your willingness to stand on that platform and use that, I think, is extremely important, especially in, we've had some really challenging social times in the last, not just in the last month, but in the last year, and ongoing for many people. And I think what you're doing is really, really important. And it shows our students a good example of perhaps what they need to be aware of. And to that end, when somebody asked, what do you think that students can do to make a difference in their communities? Do you have any suggestions for student activities or such? And
so I'll share a little bit about my time in high school and just in, school in general. I was not a good student, which, probably led me to the military. But had I, had the mentality I did post-service when I went to college, like I definitely would have treated stuff different. But, I think communities all across the country and really the world all have unique challenges. So depending on where they're located and, what local issues there are, as well as what's affecting us as a nation, can help shape, what we see inside our schools. I want to bring it back to the mental health thing in a moment, but I would say be people of integrity. there's a lot I want to unload in this answer, but I know we don't have much time. The thing I liked the most, or one of the things I liked the most about my time in service, is that I was surrounded by people that, when it was something that had to do with, our mission or whatever we were working on, our training, if I asked somebody, question, a leader or, somebody who was my equivalent, but on another team, whatever it may be, I asked them a question, I took their word at face value, just because we all were trained and raised in this mentality of, integrity above all else. I think in just everyday life that I face, talking with, people in business or in my local community and stuff like that, anytime it's demonstrated that somebody doesn't have a lack of integrity, or has a lack of integrity, it's just something that just bothers me to like my core. I believe in doing the right thing whenever possible. And for me, there's no excuse not to do that, but that's not always carried. That same mentality is not always carried by people. We see it in the news. We see it in our, local communities, all the way up to, federal government level. And I just feel like, having the courage to do the right thing, regardless of what it may mean personally or, even financially, things of that nature, I value that more than anything. And so, if you get caught in something where you need to own up to it, own it, accept whatever consequences they are, and have the courage to, learn from that and, continue adapting and moving forward. And one of the topics of, in mental health that I like to bring up has to do, and I always relate it to this, but it applies in this situation as well. If you're ever faced with a choice, like during your time in school, if there's ever a time where you're worried about somebody's perception of you over the quality of your life and your happiness, then those people aren't people you need to be associated with. So thinking about like my personal journey, like I was worried about what others would think of me if they knew I was reaching out to help for PTSD, but I knew that my happiness, like my quality of life for the rest of my life, far outweighed what the opinions of a few people are. And life is full of change, and we're constantly moving, having new opportunities, meeting new people. The opinions of others around you right now are not worth considering when it comes to what the effects could be on the rest of your life. And so if, you're ever being pressured into do something that you don't want to, or being, influenced in a way that you're not comfortable with, like stand up to that. I mean, you are in charge of your own life, and what you choose to do with it is entirely up to you. But don't let somebody's opinions of your actions influence who you want to be. I think we're in a world that we get a bunch of different things coming at us through media, social media especially, and we have, a lot of people telling us how to think, how to feel, what to wear, how to act, all of that stuff. But, have the courage to be who you want to be. If you, want to be a starving artist when you grow up, then go ahead and do it. I mean, we are in a land of opportunity that you do have the ability, if you want to be creative, if you want to be dedicated, if you want to accomplish your own personal mission, you can do whatever you want, but just do it for yourself, if that makes sense. Right. That was another long, I'm really good at like long-winded questions today and answers. Well, I don't know why, but I guess I'm just comfortable on this platform, but I hope that answered the question.
That's the best thing you could have told me just there, because what I'd like to say is that I still have a stack of questions. There are more questions in the chat box. Could we do it again? Would you come back and chat with us again? And maybe we'll narrow down a topic ahead of time so we can entertain more questions.
Absolutely. And then maybe in the meantime, Kathy, we can come up with a collaborative way to take some of the questions we miss, and then maybe I could respond to them via email or something like that. I would love to answer everybody's question on here. I think part of being a recipient that I enjoy the most is just being able to talk to people in all different walks of life, different backgrounds, those who have served, those who haven't, because it's a great opportunity. There's not that many of us around, and asking some of these questions just about our experiences and what we learned, and how other people can serve without wearing a uniform, I think is incredibly important. And so I think there's a lot of stuff that we could have got to today, but yeah, I'm definitely more than happy to come back and further the conversation.
Super. Well, we need some more time, and so we will schedule more. I want to tell Kyle, thank you so much for the time that you've spent with us. Even as is, I overlooked some things. I didn't tell you about the Medal of Honor Society, but if you go to cmohs.org, you'll be able to learn all about it and find out what all we do, including where to write to us to find out if we can set up, because, and Kyle, you just sort of volunteered yourself, we try to do Zoom meetings with classrooms now. In the old days, we did in-person meetings when we could, and I hope we'll return to those. But in the meantime, thank goodness for a platform like this that lets us get out there anyway. So all those of you who we can't see but who we hope are listening, thank you for spending this time with us. We want to thank our sponsors that make this possible. You'll see them there on the screen. And like I said, everything else about the Medal of Honor Society, the recipients, and the Character Development Program is on the cmohs.org website. And again, Kyle, thank you, and we'll plan another visit real soon.
All right. Thank you for having me. It was great to be here, and yeah, I look forward to doing it again.
Okay. Thanks much.